morning and welcome to VSA Capital 5-Minute Morning Miner. It's Wednesday, May the 7th. And let's start today with joining some dots together on one of my favorite subjects. There were two announcements today that actually linked together, believe it or not. One was out of Kazera Global and the other was out of Strategic Minerals. Now, unless you follow both, that could be quite confusing to join the dots. Paul, I'm sure you can join the dots there, but why don't you start by telling us what's happened with Kazera?
Okay, I can do. And with Kazera, they have won a U.S. Just shy of $12 million arbitration ruling in Namibia against their Chinese partner for that partner's failure to stump up the cash in a timely manner, as called for by their agreements on the acquisition attempt on Kazera's interest in the Tantalum Valley African Tantalum subsidiary back in 2022. Kazera hadn't been able to reach an agreement privately with that partner, so they took it to arbitration as called for under the documents that were initially signed, and they have won this case, including the legal costs. So it's a good outcome for Kazera. Now, hopefully that means a good cash infusion for them.
Well, it should, but one of the biggest shareholders of Kazera is Tectonic Gold. Tectonic Gold have made it quite clear at some stage they are going to sell that position. But with today's price over 2p, when I last looked, it was about 2.1p, they obviously will get a very good lump of money. Actually, it's trading at 1.95 at the moment. Lump of money in. And of course, Tectonic then are merging with Godolphin Exploration. That merger goes through on May the 13th. And they become very similar in many ways to Strategic Minerals. And Strategic Minerals this morning had some very good news, didn't they, Paul?
Yeah, I'm trying to pull that up on my sheet, so I'll let you talk about it at the moment.
Well, Strategic Minerals basically announced this morning that they've been doing some more work on their project at Redmoor, and the tungsten results are coming in much better than expected. This actually, I can tell you, I've actually been to site. Obviously, you can't see the material when you're there. It's in a sort of valley. You go into a scrapyard. But they have very high grade tin and tungsten. And so that's very good news, what I describe as for Cornish exploration businesses. And I think, this just so putting the dots together, Tamar Resources is going to come out on May the 13th with a nice cash inflow coming from the Tectonic part, the Australian part, whatever, and Kazera. And then they can go off drilling. And we know the results are likely to be good. The fact of the matter is that Cornwall and actually a little bit of Devon as well, the southwest of England, is absolutely chock-a-block of really good grade tin, tungsten. Actually, there's some copper, of course. Tamar has Devon Great Consols, which is a copper asset. It's just a case of waiting and letting these guys get on with it. And then the UK is going to have a fantastic mining industry. Why people can't get their act together and get going with this, particularly governments, local authorities, etc. I do not know. It will bring in so much income and tax and prosperity to the United Kingdom. But there you go, you've heard that from me before. The other thing on Kazera worth mentioning, of course, is that this was an arbitration case. As you know, arbitration is something that we've been looking at a lot. It's becoming more and more common in the mining space and more successful. And Panthera, which again we've talked about a lot on this podcast, has their notice of claim coming out on May the 16th. So not long to go for that. Just over a week, and obviously we're expecting a pretty big number there. And when the notice number comes out, it could be they're literally trading in cents to the dollars. And at this stage, they probably should be trading at like 10 cents to the dollars. As you get closer to the court case, it tends to move up to sort of 30 cents in the dollar. So there's still massive upside to come from Panthera Resources with this news coming up. That's probably enough from me. Back to you, Paul. Come on, talk about some other news.
Yeah, real quickly to mention some key points here. First of all, the Barrick Gold shareholders formally adopted the name change to Barrick Mining as of the AGM results yesterday. Specifically, I'm sure that has to do with its greater focus going forward over the next 5 years to develop copper assets to become a much more consistent and a larger proportion of overall revenues year on year at Barrick, and that would reflect it to therefore start looking more like firms like BHP and South 32 and those names like that, which are polymetallic in character rather than just gold. We also hear that from Endeavour Silver that they have begun wet commissioning of their new mill on the brand new Terronera gold silver project near Acapulco in Mexico. That's good news there, as shareholders have been waiting a little while for Terronera to get developed, even as Endeavor's own primary silver deposits have been declining in margins for a few years now, and Terronera being a much higher gold component in its ores as a brand new discovery should otherwise be transformative for the operating results for Endeavour once in full production. Also wanted to mention that Asiamet Resources, the AIM-quoted Kalimantan copper explorer, has put out a new feasibility study for their BKM copper deposit. Annual copper cathode production estimated at 10,000 tons with a 13-year life of mine. Uh, that would produce 124,000 tons of LME grade copper cathode. It is intended to be a Solvex extraction project with initial capital cost of $178 million at a low strip ratio because so much of the ore very near surface at 0.77 to 1. Life of mine cash costs at $1.79 and all-in sustaining costs at $2.37. I would point out that appears to be a little bit smaller in annual output than what the initial feasibility study had estimated, and the capex is also an increase, as is true for all of these companies now putting out feasibility studies given inflationary cost pressures.
Where are we on Asiamet, Paul? I mean, but we've been talking about this one for over 15 years now. Obviously, the problem is Kalimantan, not easy to operate in. But I mean, you've still got to. We've been discussing it for years and years and years and years and years. It just sort of goes on and on and on. Where are we in terms of the political and something actually happening here?
Well, Asiamet has had a controlling shareholder in the private equity group out of Australia. It has also was in a couple of years in negotiation, which ultimately didn't come to fruition, with a Southeast Asian potential financier to put BKM into production. BKM, project wise, otherwise hasn't had a whole lot of activity on the ground going either in the last 10 years. Because of the company not wanting to become an operator specifically itself unless it had outside joint venture financing or an outright financier to take ultimate control of the whole thing. So in the meantime, of course, estimated operating costs march on with the ebb and flow of the copper prices and inflationary pressures. And Indonesia, of course, hasn't been the most friendly for Western people to invest in either, simply because of its close ties to China and the influence that China has, particularly in the nickel space, but otherwise. The government, with really sincere efforts in order to get added value processing also into the country, specifically financed by outsiders. Being a Solvex project, that is added processing to carry the copper metal as a sellable product. So that never has been an issue in this particular case.
I bump into Tony Manini, the chairman. Obviously, he's on the private equity group EMR fairly regularly at conferences and things. So I think it's time I gave him a buzz. And we maybe had a closer look at this with what's going on in the world, because who knows, one day it may be resolved and then suddenly the share price will pop up. Okay, anything else, Paul? That's probably enough, isn't it?
That's enough for today.
All right, very good. Back tomorrow, thanks.
Very good.
This podcast has been produced and edited by VSA Capital. It is intended for information purposes and not as investment advice. The information is intended for recipients who understand the risks associated with equity investments in smaller companies. Please do your own research and do not rely on a single source when making an investment decision. VSA Capital may derive fees from this content and seeks to do business with the companies mentioned.